knowing what it's like to have been persecuted. I haven't I haven't experienced the Holocaust. It's in my family and I feel it. It's I think the reason why I do the things that I do today also. It's the reason why I'm a leftist. And this is what I feel I can connect with Palestinians in Denmark, that we come from these similar narratives of having these feelings of persecution being, jumping from generation to generation. And I think this is maybe something that Israelis and Palestinians should, we have that in common.
Welcome to Women Ending War, the podcast where Palestinian and Israeli women talk about partnerships for peace, real solutions, and ideas for crafting a new world.
It's where we express our pain, anger, dreams, creativity, and vision, where hope is a conscious choice.
معاكم أميرة مسلم.
I'm Ilana Stockman. Thanks for joining us. Hello, Sarah.
Hello, Ilana.
So nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. It's been a while.
It's been a while since you moved from Israel to Denmark. Yes. It's nice to have you back here.
Thank you.
Even though it's kind of crazy times.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. We met, has it been 10 years ago? 10 years ago? Almost 10 years ago when you started your project, an amazing project called Political is Personal, where you've been interviewing women, Israeli and Palestinian women, about our stories. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that project?
Sure. So it was a project that I started 10 years ago now. And I knew at the time that there were women's peace organization or women's initiatives having to do with within the context of the conflict or the political situation, because saying conflict is political as well. So I've been
hearing that a lot also, that a lot of Palestinians don't want to call it a conflict because that sounds balanced and
I call it the political situation or the situation here. And so what I really wanted to do was to contribute to that, to the work that is already here, by simply hearing what women had to say. So creating this platform where I collected testimonies from Israeli Jewish women in Israel and Palestinian women from the West Bank, Gaza, and Palestinians in Israel, 48 Palestinians or Arab Israelis. That's also very political. So
how people self-identify is very political, yes.
Yeah.
And also you have different contexts, like Palestinians living in Gaza have a different story than Palestinians in Haifa or Mufahim or Bethlehem or Nablus. They're all different stories.
Yeah, it's very, very nuanced. And I wanted to, I think the main objectives with this was to, first of all, to contribute to elevating women's voices, because although it's not unique for Israel and Palestine, women's voices are always just not there.
Marginalized, invisible, excluded.
Yeah. Politically, you don't have, we don't have them around the negotiation table for, as far as I know, there were no women present during the ceasefire talks. And every time a peace proposal, and a serious and important peace proposal, has been introduced, what you see is older men, and which is fine, but you need also a representation of women.
Rachel Goldberg Pollen, whose son Hirsch was taken hostage and then killed. So before he was killed, actually, she said very publicly, more than once, she said, if we just put the mothers in the room, the mothers of the hostages and the mothers of the Palestinians in Gaza, just put the mothers in the room, we would have had this whole thing over, right away. That's what she said. I totally agree. I totally believe that.
I think there's a lot to it, really. Sometimes I don't like that kind of responsibility, given onto women, this which I think is part of this whole mental load thing, because I think women should have the right to be a lot of other things. We also should have the right to be aggressive, to be, well, not always, but we should also be other things than that. And I think
other
that
than the nurturers and carers. And,
yeah. And I think that men are capable of finding within themselves, in their emotional thing, to also make peace. I think it's very socialized. But I do sometimes wonder, especially now after having had a daughter and having become mom, I sometimes wonder where is the parenthood segment in these politicians' decision making? Where does that come into play? Do they see other people's children as their own, or are they just able to disconnect from that?
Or not even. I mean, even here locally, you see in the Knesset members very actively, removing parents of hostages and parents of those who were killed. You see them being removed from discussions. Or there was this famous video of the Knesset members not looking, looking away. Not, and some of the parents were like, just look at me in the face when you reject the ceasefire deal, when you reject the hostage deal, when you say this is going to be an endless war, or whatever. Look me in the face. And they couldn't even look the parents in the face. And it's almost as if to be a parent is considered not legitimate, because then it's like, oh, well, those concerns are not the legitimate, correct concerns. You're too biased, you're too affected, too emotional, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. All of those things, so it's almost as if in military thought, in military strategic thinking, to be a parent is like a weakness. It gets in the way.
Yeah. That it's something that you need to just separate in order to function.
It's so wrong.
Yeah.
It's so wrong. It's so dehumanizing. It's part of the whole dehumanization of military thinking, where you're thinking about numbers and categories and targets, and you're not thinking about people and real people. I mean, that's what we need. It's not like what you're saying about, why should it be up to the women to humanize the situation? That's a big burden on women too. But what tell me what you're basically saying is that what we need is humanization. What we need is human thinking, that we're thinking about human beings. We're thinking about people as parents,
Yeah, no, I mean, the reason why I chose to only interview women wasn't because I saw them as being the ones who had to take over the world and do peace. It was because their voices are just not heard as much as men, and I'm a woman myself, so that is what I can identify with. I'm sure that it would be interesting to interview men as well, and really to hear about their feelings and what it's really like to perhaps be a soldier, stand at a checkpoint, go into Gaza. I'm not diminishing that, but that will be the task of someone else to do. I want to focus on women.
You want to do a corrective. It's like a corrective measure to elevate the voices of those. Mm-hmm. So what have you found? What were some of the interesting stories that you found?
I mean, there is a lot of, so many, I feel that every story is like a world in itself.
How many women have you interviewed?
Over 100.
Over 100.
I would like to continue.
Tell us a little bit about the stories. Each story you said is a world.
It's obviously there are different. I want to say that I'm not interviewing women from both sides in order to show, oh yes, women are living the same kind of lives, and because that is something that people will judge a project on, you're, especially in the pro-Palestinian movement, there will be the project has been judged because you're interviewing Palestinian women and also Israeli women. Are you trying to create some form of balance? And that's not my intention here. It was to focus on women, and you do obviously have very different testimonies, like a Palestinian woman who is from, let's say, Hebron, has a very different life than an Israeli Palestinian or a Palestinian living in Israel. and the same for Jewish Israeli women. What I tried to do was really to enable, give them the control. I didn't want to have any filters. I didn't want it to, although there's probably some bias because I'm still the one, it's still going through me. So there probably is some form of bias, but I wanted it to be their story. So I told them, I'm going to interview you within the context of the conflict or the political situation. Mm-hmm. And it's if you have something in mind, tell me. So there are many different things that have come up. I will say, though, that one very big theme that I feel most women have spoken about, whether consciously or unconsciously, is the theme of personal security. What it feels like to be secure, like really secure, not security like the kind of security that the big important politicians talk about, but what it feels like to feel secure, like just walking somewhere, or genuine security if you live in the Gaza envelope, or that is a theme that I feel is there.
But women often define personal security in different ways than military strategists will define it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think if that theme was included in the decisions that politicians, decision makers would make when it comes to Israel and Palestine, I think it would do a lot. Because it's also a way to humanize it. So that's like a general theme, but I've really heard a lot of different things that I've learned a lot from. I've had a lot of my own, I think,
like preconceived notions.
Broken. I've always thought, and I also think that I'm a very open and tolerant person, but I've had some of my own preconceived. What do you call it?
Preconceived notions, like old ideas that we carry with us that we don't even realize that until we start to talk with someone who comes from a different place, then we're like, oh, I didn't realize that I had that bias or that misconception or that stereotype or that generalization. Yeah.
Yeah.
That happens with me a lot also in these podcasts, by the way, in a lot of these interviews. Yeah. You hear things from people who have lived different lives than you. And they break down some things you held in your brain that you didn't even know.
I mean, you've written a book about it now.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a lot of work, actually. It takes a lot of work. This has come up a lot also in the podcast. It takes a lot of work, a lot of courage, a lot of flexibility and willingness to sort of humble yourself a little bit, to be able to, hear something and say, that challenges something that I always thought was true, and I'm still willing to hear it, and I'm willing to question that thing that I thought was true my whole life.
Yeah.
To do that, to question a thing that you thought was true your whole life, that you might have even built your life on, to question that, it takes a lot of work. But that is the work, to really be present with someone else and really hear their story, and really let their story and their perspective sink in for you. That's it. That's like everything. I mean, that's why I think your work is so important, because that's what you're doing with it. You're going in, right? I mean, you're meeting these women, you're meeting women who have different lives, different perspectives, and you're giving them a space to share their narrative exactly as it is, to share their lives and their histories and their perspectives and their needs and their wants and their desires exactly as they are, without the filter, without that intermediary, I'm going to interpret that for you. I'm going to explain that for you. It's like, no, just as is. I feel like there's such a need for that in this political situation. There's such a need for that in this because we live in such stereotyping cultures where our culture will say, our leaders will say, they know everything there is to know about the other, about those people, and all of these actions, these violent actions, are taken on the basis of, I know them. Well, do you? Do we? No, we don't. We assume the worst. We assume the worst about the other all the time.
There's a lot of dehumanization, a lot. I mean, you've spoken, I've heard a lot of the episodes here and
dehumanization comes up a lot.
Yeah, there is a lot. And
thank you, by the way, for listening. That's really nice.
No, I like it. Yeah, it's very hopeful, or what do you call it? Hope creating podcast. And I think a lot more people should listen to it, especially those that are involved in Israel and Palestine or who have an opinion about it.
Because we hear all the time that there are no partners, that, there's no partners, everybody's like this, we hear that all the time.
Yeah.
Both sides say there's no partner on the other side.
Yeah.
Or there are no solutions. I hear this all the time. Over the holiday, I heard this also. It's like, well, what solutions are there? And it's like, I always cite ALMEP. Like I say, ALMEP has 170 organizations, Israeli, Palestinian, binational, grassroots organizations that are all working, dedicating themselves entirely to solutions. And then I also talk about Forum 1325, which is promoting solutions, at least 4 solutions. There are at least 4 available solutions. There's a 2-state solution, there's a binational state, there's a federation, and there's a confederation, and then there's some hybrid. There are all kinds of variations on them. They all have advantages and disadvantages, but they're out there. It's just that we don't have necessarily leadership who wants to look at it. The leadership is looking away. They want us to believe that there are no partners, that everybody just wants violence, that there are no real solutions. They want us to believe that for their own political reasons, their own reasons having to do with their own power, not having to do with what's good for people. So that's why what you're doing is also it's so important, because it's so important for us to understand real lives of real people, especially those who, like you say, aren't heard, and understand that people want a different reality and people have a vision of a different reality. And it can be here if we just take the opportunity to make the choice to see it and to hear it and to listen to it.
Yeah. No, I definitely, I read the news. I try to keep myself informed in that way. But many times when something has happened, whether in Israel or in Gaza or in the West Bank, I contact people that I know there and want to hear from them what is this to you, or what has happened, because I feel that the way that things are covered is just, it is very dehumanizing. It's very, you will hear, 150 people were killed there, 53 injured, 50 missiles. You don't get the personal stories at all. You don't get the depth. You don't get the nuances, the contradictions. Also, many times when I've interviewed these women, they contradict themselves. They will have said something in the beginning, and then towards the end, maybe, they will negate that, or they will, there's a form of contradiction. And I guess if I wanted their text to sound nice, I would flatten out these contradictions and simplify it. But I think this is also important because these are human feelings. I've seen that, for example, a lot with the women in Gaza that I've interviewed, which was one of the things that kind of broke my preconceived notions. I don't know if they would say the same today, but what surprised me was that there was a lot of both of empathy towards Israelis, even Israeli soldiers, and at the same time, anger, of course, fear, and other weird feelings in what they told me. And this is important. This is, I think, the essence of the human experience here. It's not just either hate or love. It's you can both, as an Israeli or a Palestinian, feel a lot of fear towards the other side, and at the same time be curious and have empathy for them as well. And this was something, that was weird.
Fear and empathy can coexist. will be accused of being, naive. And, you don't understand. I get this all the time on social media. People were like, do you understand what happened on October 7th? And I have to, explain like, yeah, I lived through it. I'm still living through it, but it's like the assumption is that if I want peace, if I believe in peace, if I believe in solutions, if I'm talking to Palestinians, if I believe that Palestinians are human beings, then obviously I don't understand things, that I obviously don't have enough fear. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Is that if I believe in that, then I haven't correctly internalized fear, And it's like what you're saying here, which really speaks to me, is that I have fear. The fear's there. Mm-hmm. Nevertheless, despite the fear, I also have hope and optimism. Hope is a choice, and also that fear isn't the only thing, and that you don't want the fear to determine all the outcomes, because that's a bad world we will live in if we're all consumed by fear, So even though fear can be all consuming, what you're saying is that even for people who have fears and real reasons to be fear can coexist with empathy, compassion, hope, optimism, and the willingness to see the human and to see the human being.
I mean, obviously, I will say that if you've, not everyone has maybe the space to speak to the other side or to be in that mindset, and that is fine. I don't expect from people, maybe especially Palestinians right now, with family members in Gaza, to be all open about, let's sit down with Israelis and open up. But I do feel that there's a lot of polarization in terms of these things, that there's a expectation of, okay, whether either Palestinians or Israelis feel like this, and then there's no space for this, or the other way, whereas it's a lot more nuanced than this. It's not just, you can't just put people into boxes like this. And I know it also about myself. I mean, it's not that I was in Denmark, luckily, on the 7th of October, but I recognized in myself that I had fear. I didn't understand what was going on. My husband was watching all these videos that I haven't watched, and I will never watch them.
He's Israeli born, your husband?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I had, my daughter at the time was 5 months old, and I couldn't watch anything with children because almost half of the time, more than half of the time that I would look at her, I would see other people's children, and I didn't want that. I recognized a fear in me, and I knew that in order to prevent myself from closing in and being fearful, I had to open up. So I actively looked for, in Denmark, for not only Jewish progressive circles that didn't feel this big revenge need, but also Palestinians in Denmark. I needed them. I needed to feel that I could be with them, in their presence, with all of me. That this would not mean that there was going to be a division between us.
What's it been like in Denmark since October 7th? What's it been like there?
I have to say, living in Denmark is, I really, I mean, I'm happy that we live there now. We did have plans of moving from Israel before the 7th of October. We kind of ended up there stranded a little bit, but if things are good.
You were like stranded, you had been planning to come back, but then you got stuck.
We had a plane ticket back on the 8th of October.
Wow.
In the morning also, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now you're just going to stay in Denmark? You're not?
Yeah, we have jobs, like my husband works, we're good. Yeah.
But while you're there, you're still active in causes?
Very much. Like I actually feel that I can do even more now for this place than I could when I lived here. I feel that there are more opportunities in Denmark. In many different ways. And
like what? Like what kind of work do you do?
Wow, I still do lectures about both political as personal, but also other themes having to do with Israel, conflict, and then I'm gonna start writing this book. I only wrote one chapter, so I need to continue it.
Good luck.
Thank you.
It's exciting.
You know what it's like. I mean, you have a lot of experience, so.
Yeah, but your book is based on 100 plus interviews, and that's what I love doing most. I love writing based on interviews. That's my training in anthropology. I love that. And I love doing analysis of interviews, and it's just a really beautiful thing to to bring those voices. And so I'm eager to see what you're going to come up with.
So I'm doing that, but I'm getting involved with different Danish conflict resolution organizations.
Are there a lot of Palestinians and Israelis living in Denmark?
Yeah, I would say relatively quite a lot. I mean, Denmark is a small country of 5.5 million people, so it's not like Germany or France, but you do have quite a lot of Danish Palestinians or Palestinians who are second or third generation Palestinians. You do
have there been like protests and things?
There have been quite a lot of, I don't know what to call them, pro-Palestinian protests. There still are. Also some pro-Israeli protests. There is a lot of activity, I feel. And I do also feel that Denmark, the government could play a bigger role, even though it's a small country, but Denmark is part of the Security Council now. Mm-hmm. So part of the things that I do also is trying to connect between civil society here and politicians, decision makers, and civil society in Denmark to create a link or to contribute to the connection here and to put some focus on the work here. That's something that I feel very strongly about. I feel I have this maybe responsibility that I might have left Israel, and I'm happy about it, but I do want this place to be better. And I feel I can do more now.
You lived in Israel for a long time.
17 years, yeah.
17 years. You were born in Denmark and then...
I was born in Switzerland.
Oh, you were born in Switzerland?
But yeah, no, it's... my mom was a diplomat, so we moved... Mom. Yeah, we moved around. We moved back and forth between Denmark and French-speaking countries in Europe, so... Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you came to Israel. You lived here for 17 years. And what were you doing then that got you involved, that got you to, initiate this political as personal project?
I think I've always been a leftist. I've always been someone looking for justice and trying to mend injustices where I've been. And then I came to Israel. And I think in the first year of me living here, I was drawn to these peace organizations or all these organizations that were trying to change the status quo here. That was me. I also visited the West Bank for the first time in 2007, and that was also a very big eye opener because I didn't know what Zionism was before I moved here. I'm Jewish, but I didn't know. But I also felt that it was difficult for me basically to see that things were being done, that harm was being done onto another people in Israelis and Jews and also in my name. It wasn't something, I wasn't so interested in the conflict here. Before I moved here, I didn't know a lot. But I was always very defensive when people would criticize Israel and Israelis because this sounds very naive, but I always thought that because of what Jews have been through, like Holocaust, pogroms and whatnot, we weren't capable of harming other people, really. That was something I felt
that's pretty common. I mean, that's a pretty common Jewish self-perception. You know, we think of ourselves as the victims and as the good guys and the chosen people and all of those things. So it's like, what are you talking about? You're accusing me of doing something really horrible? Can't be. That's why, you know, that the use of the word genocide, for example, it breaks down all conversations, because Jews for the most part, can't even possibly comprehend the idea that we as the Jewish people are doing something so bad that other people will perceive it as a genocide. Like, that's not possible. That's not who we are. We are Holocaust victims. We are the good guys. We are the chosen people. We are God's oldest, you know, God's Bahar and all of that. Like, you know, we're the special ones. How can you even accuse us? Like, most Jews cannot even engage in that kind of conversation. That's one of the reasons why, like, you know, I don't use the word genocide, not because I don't believe in it. I don't know. For me, it's like a label, you know, that I don't know how to define it, but it's definitely not something that helps conversations. You know, all it does is put Jews on the defensive. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like, that just doesn't help. So I'd rather talk about what's actually happened and what we're actually doing than try to fight that.
Yeah.
Fight that self-perception of like, what? We can't do anything wrong. That's all wrong. How could you accuse us of that? Like, I don't want to get into all that. So I avoid it.
Yeah.
That's not the best strategy, but like, it's so ingrained, this idea of like that we're the good guys. You know, it's very hard to break down that barrier.
Yeah, and I actually understand it, because it's again these kind of poles. You know, either you're the good guy or you're the bad guy. Either you're the victim or the oppressor, and you can't be both. And I think that's a big issue here, that to accept the fact that we've been victims and there is still anti-Semitism in the world, I'm not going to deny it, but we're also the oppressors, and these things can go together. And I think if more people were to accept that, I mean, I feel okay with that now. Like these kind of polls, it's even liberating in a sense to not be scared of these two different things.
It doesn't have to be black and white. We can live in grays and nuance and complexities. Yeah,
I think that, and I think also I feel that the reason why I need to connect with Palestinians in Denmark is also because I connect with them knowing what it's like to have been persecuted. I haven't I haven't experienced the Holocaust on my own body, but it's in my family and I feel it. It's I think the reason why I do the things that I do today also. It's the reason why I'm a leftist. And
it's part of the collective memory, part of the collective consciousness.
And this is what I feel I can connect with Palestinians in Denmark, that we understand each other because we come from these similar narratives of having fled a place, and these feelings of persecution being, jumping from generation to generation. And I think this is maybe something that Israelis and Palestinians should, we have that in common. It's not a nice thing to have in common, but I think there should maybe be more focus on that, on how,
Have these conversations gotten harder since October 7th?
In Denmark?
In Denmark or in general in your work?
Good question. I mean, there is a lot of even more polarization. I feel that either you're this or you're that, and a lot of there's no place for dialogue because everything is about this genocide. So we can't, you can't, the anti-normalization movement has become stronger, I feel. More in Denmark or in places outside of Israel and Palestine. Like we talked about this also.
Yeah, this also comes up a lot in the podcast. We hear this a lot, that voices outside, people who are not actually living it, but are just, protesting out there in the world, are often much more extreme and radical than here.
Yeah, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that people here don't have a choice. It's not a game. It's not like a video game. It's their lives. And at the end of the day, most people, I guess, would like to live here in security, to feel that they have the same rights as everyone else and live in peace. And
it's real people here. It's real people who you theoretically interact with. I say theoretically because whether or not, Palestinians and Israelis interact is a whole other question. But in theory, it's people that are, using the same, rivers and streams and air and electricity. And if there's a hurricane, we're all going to feel it. And if there's a drought, we're all going to feel it, kind of thing. And if a road is built theoretically, again, I say theoretically because it's not exactly the case that we use the same roads. But, in theory, we're here together. You know, and like here, people who are looking for solutions, for the most part, have this premise that they understand that, we can't demonize, 7 or 8 million people who are different than us. We have to sort of accept as a premise that they're here and we're here, and we have to figure out how to make that work so that we can all live normal lives, So, but when you're sitting, in some campus somewhere, you can scream, whatever you want. Somebody in Colombia can scream, Jews go back to Poland or whatever, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Yeah. But because it's not real people, you're not talking about real people. That's what I feel like. That's something that I feel like comes up a lot. So in Denmark, you also see that? You feel like that voices can be more...
A little bit. Maybe not as much as in some other countries, but you do have that. These intellectual debates also. I feel, and sometimes I feel that it might be a little bit dangerous even to propose dialogue, because it's often seen as a way of, again, creating some form of balance between Israelis and Palestinians. And obviously there is, I think what is important in dialogue is to recognize, yes, there is an occupation, there is a blockade, there is an unequal balance, but you do need dialogue. You can't have the opposite. You can't just have silence or non-communication. You do need, if everyone here needs to live here, then there needs to be dialogue in some ways. Mm-hmm. And this is what I feel most people here realize and need. And obviously people who live outside of the region don't need it because they live wherever they live. So that's something that can be very frustrating,
Interesting.
To listen to sometimes.
Can I ask you another question about Denmark, actually? Because I'm following the whole story about Denmark and Greenland and Trump and all of that.
Yeah.
And I was just reading an essay in the New York Times by a Danish parliamentary member of parliament who's trying to explain how shocked Danes are by Trump's overt hostility. Yeah. And it sort of feels like Denmark may be shifting alliances or shifting, and I'm just wondering whether the Denmark fight with Trump would have any implications for all this, because if Denmark designates Trump as an enemy, or Trump designates Denmark as an enemy, which sort of, how would that affect the Danish position vis-a-vis Israel, Palestinians? Like, with that, especially if Trump and Bibi are, buddy-buddy, what would that mean for all the people that Trump is now designating as enemies? Like, I'm just curious how these things might affect, if at all. Maybe I'm like leaping too far in this, just maybe there's so much chaos and I'm trying to make some order out of it. But I'm just curious if you had any thoughts about the larger political implications of, world events on what's going on here between Palestinians and Israelis.
It's definitely a funny, I don't know, weird, very weird. Mm-hmm. I think at first a lot of Danes, including myself, thought that it was a joke or some weird stunt.
It sounds like a joke. Like, I'm going to buy Greenland sounds like a joke.
Yeah,
yes.
It sounds very, and Danes, I think, in terms of culture, Denmark is like the opposite of American culture. Very sensationalist. Yeah. Now that Danes and the Danish government understands that it's a little serious, or I still don't know if it's a stunt, if it's something to place the focus on something else, and then a lot of people have talked about how Trump and his government is like throwing things out so that other things can be done. I don't know if it has to do with that. I
actually don't think it's a stunt. I don't think the Greenland thing is a stunt.
Okay.
I think it has to do with trade and controlling waters around the Arctic and controlling trade routes. I mean, I think that's about money, and I think that ultimately all that Trump cares about is about money. And therefore, the whole Greenland thing and the Danish thing actually, I think, is very, very serious because he very seriously wants to acquire land around the Arctic. I mean, I think that that's what this is about. But it's true that he throws out a lot of things. But it's like, I'm just curious how, like, the world is currently being realigned completely. You know, there's a whole realignment of like everything. And I guess it worries me a little bit, or maybe I shouldn't be worried, I don't know. But, you know, Bibi is one of Trump's like besties, you know. So like, what is that going to look like?
I think one good thing is coming out of all of this. And that is that the EU is becoming stronger. The alliances between the European countries are strengthening. Mm-hmm. That's what I see in all of this, which I like. Mm-hmm. I think the European Union is a good thing, and I think that it needs to,
interesting.
Yeah.
So it could strengthen the EU, which has other.
Yeah, and I see that because of the cut in US aid, also. A lot of most NGOs here are turning towards Europe now, including Denmark.
Interesting.
So I think also that in terms of that, the EU will have to and will also take a bigger role in what is going on here. That maybe if or when there will be peace negotiations, if foreign mediators would be from Europe instead of
interesting.
The US, yeah.
So that could have lots of interesting implications. All right, tough. So, what's next for you? What's next? You're here for another week or something.
Yeah,
and then,
a couple of more days, and then we're heading back.
And then you're still looking to do more interviews with women before you finish your book.
No. The book is based on what I've done so far, but I want to continue.
And you have a website for the interviews? www.politicalispersonal or
just in one go, politicalispersonal.org. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yep.
And if people want to be interviewed by you, they can contact you via your website.
Yeah. I really hope that this year or maybe next year we'll do some more interviews.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And one last question before we say goodbye. We like to ask this question to our interviewees.
Yeah.
What brings you hope amid all this?
NGOs here and the work, like things like this, AllMap, all the organizations here. I really actually do think that there are a lot of possibilities. Actually, right today I had a conversation with someone on Facebook who was very skeptical. And I told them I think that everything is possible. It's the Middle East is very dynamic as well. Politicians are pragmatic. Things can happen here and there, and there are many solutions. There are peace agreements that could be signed right now. You know it. I mean, the women are also there if people want to listen.
Yeah.
The people who want peace are there. They just need more focus. They need maybe
more support, more resources.
Support.
Yeah,
but sure. It's all there. I don't need to look. I'm probably very hopeful in general. So
that's great.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. Sarah Arnd Linder, researcher, writer, optimist, peace activist. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
And good luck with all your endeavors.
Thank you, Ilana.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Women Ending War. If you want to help create change, you should join us.
Subscribe, like, comment, or share. Tell your friends about us. Talk about it. Be part of the solution.
Thanks, and see you next time.